So in our Grout 101 today, we are going to be talking about grout specifications, the applications and characteristics of grout, how to prepare your surface for success, mixing and placement, the hot and cold weather applications, and how can we assist you in your grouting needs. So my name is Heidi Rees, and I am in the marketing department at Dayton Superior. And before we get to today's presenter and the presentation, I just want to remind everyone that you are all muted so that not to disturb any background noise, and everybody can listen in to the webinar and hear the presentation. But please feel free to ask any questions through the chat functionality in Zoom, and I will ask those questions at the end of the presentation. Also, this presentation is being recorded so that you can re-listen, share with someone that couldn't make it, or if you think might find it beneficial, you can forward on to them. Okay, so who's our presenter today? We have Caleb Stroud, and he is Dayton Superior's Technical Sales Representative. His extensive experience in the development and support of chemical powders, liquids, and epoxies make him an asset of knowledge. We are super excited to have him talking about the Grouts 101 training today. He's one of Dayton Superior's technical service representatives that assist in chemical production specification needs, as well as any chemical technical questions. He is a Missouri Western State University graduate and has been in the industry for a little over 6 years. He began his career in the technical services and then moved into the technical sales role. So Caleb, tell us more about Grout 101.
Thanks, Heidi, for the introduction. Can everybody hear me? Hear me good?
We can.
Okay, perfect. So we'll move forward here a little bit. So we're going to talk about grouts, as Heidi said. Non-shrink grouts in specific. We won't get probably too deep into epoxy grouts today and just kind of stay on point with cementitious, but we will talk vaguely about epoxy grouts. So we want to go over some of the objectives here. What is a grout? What grout specifications we're going to go over in accordance with ACI, ASTM, and Army Corps of Engineers. Different grouting applications, characteristics and types, how to prep it, mixing and placing, hot and cold weather applications, and then we'll kind of put into perspective what Dayton has to offer into these categories. One key factor I want to point out that there is very often a misconception of what our grout is, or what a non-shrink grout is. It is not a masonry or tile grout. It is a completely different chemical makeup. It reacts completely different. So, you'd be surprised at how many people have that misconception, but we just, want to be upfront about that when talking about it. And our grout basically is consisted of, specially graded aggregates, Portland cement and or epoxy, as I said, and other proprietary ingredients to help transfer load and when it comes to anchoring or filling in voids as well. A non-shrink grout is intended, for textbook definition, intended for the use under applied loads such as support a structure, a machine, and the like, where a change in height below the initial placement height is to be avoided. And that's pretty much directly off the ASTM C1107 grout specification. So the function of a non-shrink grout, as stated, with the ASTM spec that I just read, fill in the void in between the base plate and the concrete foundation completely and permanently without shrinkage or separation from either. So basically all that means is you're filling in a void here, and you want to make sure that the substance, being the grout, does not shrink, and in fact actually expands just ever so slightly to where it creates that pressure in between the substrate and the plate that you're putting it there. So basically transferring all the loads from a base plate to the concrete foundation. A non-shrink grout must bleed and must expand after hardening. 85% of the total shrinkage, the results of bleeding, and 15% of the total shrinkage is a result of drying shrinkage, which occurs basically after the grout has been cured. So ACI specifications, the American Concrete Institute is a leading authority and resource worldwide for development, dissemination, and adoption of its Synosis-based standards, technical resources, educational and training purposes, certification programs, and proven expertise for individuals and organizations. Yeah, mouthful. But yes, ACI is a key factor when talking about non-shrink grouts, especially with hot and cold applications. ASTM is the governing entity that pretty much controls and that everyone pretty much conforms to in today's world as far as testing standards around what makes the non-shrink grout basically applicable and used throughout the industry. And I won't dive too deep into this one because we could talk about specs for a very long time. But as I said, the ASTM C1107 is the generalized specification that most entities usually reference when speccing a non-shrink grout. And listed below, you'll see all of the different testing methods that go in to the 1107. So the 1107 is your basic umbrella spec, and then below are all the other specs that fall underneath that. And there are certain guidelines under there that each one has to meet in order for it to pass the 1107 specification. And then the Army CRD 621, the Corps of Engineers specification, they've actually done away with their own, and they just reference the ASTM C1107. So if you ever see a spec pop up where it says the CRD C621, then they are just conforming to the 1107. So, grouts can be used in many different kinds of applications. These are just, I've seen a lot of things that are not on this list, but the basic things that, most people who manufacture non-shrink grouts put as far as applications, interior, exterior, can be used on base plates, bearing pads, bridge keyways, precast tilt, inserts and anchorages, basically anywhere where you want a strong product where load is transferred. Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry, locked up on me. So types of grouts. You have your cementitious non-metallic and you have your cementitious metallic. Everyone's kind of gone away from the metallic version. Basically all that means is back in the day when, grouts were made, they used basically like metal rocks or aggregates in it. And what they found out is due to elemental factors such as water being a key one, caused the aggregates to rust and then basically break down within, making it not last very long. And then the industry switched to non-metallic, and you just basically would increase the life of your grout by not using a metal, especially where there is moisture present. So I would say 98% of stuff that I see in today, references cementitious non-metallic grouts. But every once in a while, we will come across older specs where it does reference that. But most everyone has kind of moved away from that. And then there are epoxy grouts. They kind of do the same functionality as a non-shrink grout. They're a lot stronger, as most people know. They also are a lot more expensive, but they have great chemical resistance, great, high impact resistance, high compressive strengths. It's just basically if you want a step up as far as strength requirements and chemical resistance, typically you want to look at using an epoxy grout. But like I said, generally it is more expensive. So depending on what your budget is for your projects, it's never a bad idea to look both at a cementitious or an epoxy grout. So prepping for grout is pretty basic. A lot of the things when referencing, repair mortars or grouts, it's kind of the same way. You just basically want to make sure that your surface is clean, you have oil and dirt removed. You want to make sure it's rough. Usually like a CSP of 3 or 4 or greater, something for it to hold on to. And basically you also want to treat it, since it is a cementitious product, you want to make sure to SSD it before applying, surface saturated dry. The ACI guideline references 351.1R. You can also read a little bit more in depth about that than what's on this slide on that guideline as well. Preparation for grouting. So as I said, you want to, after you chip out your areas, previous to grouting, you want to SSD it, basically flood it. The reason is if you have a really dry area, and most people probably know this on here, that if you put something wet down, the dry concrete below it is going to want to pull water away from whatever cementitious product you're putting down, grout being one of them. So you just want to be sure to make sure that you're not pulling any moisture away, because each one, the water is specifically designed. The instructions on the bag are specifically designed for that grout to have those strength requirements with that amount of water. You pull water away, you can make it weaker, and it potentially could cause problems down the road. So it's always pretty key just to make sure that you SSD it, basically flood it 24 hours beforehand. Or, sometimes you can just kind of lightly saturate it 4 hours beforehand, before placing your grout, just to ensure it doesn't pull any water away. Mixing's pretty key. There's many different variations of it. You can use equipment, whether it's a bucket, or you can use mortar mixers, smaller batches. I've seen guys use 55-gallon drums or trash cans or whatever you want to do. You typically, if you do use a mortar mixer, you want to make sure it's not a high speed one. You want it to move nice and evenly and slow, and to make sure it mixes all right, especially when it comes to epoxies. Epoxy products, you could definitely work air into it, and that's the last thing you want. So just, a low speed mortar mixer works great. You can use a pail with a paddle mixer, or like I said, a drum, whatever. It's not rocket science, but there's more than one way of doing it. There also is placement, so mixing and placing. We actually have had a lot of our grouts tested with Chem Grout, a manufacturer. We've used other manufacturers such as Graco on a lot of projects throughout the country and the world, for that matter. So you can use different systems, but these systems are compatible. You just need to know, typically I think a rule guideline is you typically don't want to use a hose over 200 feet. And you want to make sure there's, the water ratios and all the gauges and everything are correct, which, obviously the manufacturer, Chem Grout or Graco or whoever else is out there, they should be able to help with that as well. So with epoxy grouts, like I said, it's always a little bit different mixing than what our cementitious is, but the same concept. You don't want to mix it too fast. Just basically make sure you mix your A and B resins first, and then you want to typically add in your aggregates. You can use a Jiffy mixer for smaller quantities or a mortar mixer for larger quantities. It's pretty much the same process. So grouting in hot and cold weather. So cold weather grouting, you always want to reference ACI 306, the guide to cold weather. The bullet points on here are, basically you don't want to place anything less than 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Hydration stops at 32 degrees. So that's why, we kind of add a little cushion in there and say 45 degrees as well as ACI. The colder temps can significantly increase your cure time. So the colder it is, the longer it's going to take to set up. So, and in the Dayton portfolio, we do have a cold weather grout that we'll kind of talk about a little bit later, but it's a super high performance grout. And then also in guidelines with cold weather grouting, make sure you heat the substrate 1 to 2 days prior to placement, or you can tent it. Precondition your grout. Make sure, you keep it at, I would say probably 70 degrees or higher. Use hot water for mixing and placing, a blanket as necessary. It's always recommended a min and max thermometer, and maintain the temperature between 45 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit for a minimum of 24 hours. Hot weather grouting, you want to reference the ACI 305, guide to hot weather concrete, same concepts, temperature above 85 degrees, keep bags cool and out of the sun, remove shrink wrap, use cool mixing water. Sometimes you can add ice. Keep the substrate or steel embedded wet or cool before placing. Then also continue into hot weather grouting, keep shaded and out of direct sunlight, and cool the grout with cotton mats continuously saturated with water. And they reference a lot of the same stuff in the ACI guidelines as well. So kind of touching on some of the things that we've already addressed, you know, the different types of applications you can and we referenced it in the mixing category. You can form and pump a fluid, you can form and pour, flowable, and you can dry pack. These reference the consistencies. And if you look at our technical data sheet, we have all the compressive strength requirements, and we also have inside test reports associating to all those per the 1107 guideline. But we have all those on there, and they have different strengths, and it basically references your different water consistencies with it depending on your application. So grout placement, you use a head box when pouring the grout. One continuous flow from side to side, or from side to area to be grouted, as you can see in the photo. Maximum neat depth for placement is 3 inches. Greater than 3 inches, it must be extended. You know, you can use up to 25 pounds of clean aggregate per 50-pound bag, which would be a yield of 50% basically. And you know, pea gravel per bag of grout, which is 50 pounds. As far as grout placement, you got your dry pack, which kind of pretty self-explanatory in the photo. What you're basically doing is you're withholding enough water to where the grout almost feels just like wet dirt, and you shove it in there, and you usually use like a little wooden hammer thing right there, basically just to push it and pack it in as tightly as you can into the void. Flowable grout, pretty much how it sounds. You know, you basically just pour it in, let it flow into the area you desired, and basically you'll go up until you come to the bearing plate or whatever your anchoring or bearing area is. And fluids, the same thing, just moves a little bit faster and easier, has more water, as well as, you know, just higher flowability. So dry pack, fluid, and now it's dry pack, flowable, now fluid, sorry. So, you know, grout placement, as we talked earlier in this, you know, you have your non-shrink grout that is placed in between your concrete foundation and your base plate. And, you know, so the grout is up against your bearing area. Curing non-shrink grout, because it is a cementitious product, you definitely want to cure it to try to make sure it gains as much strength as it possibly can, just like you would with concrete. You know, recommend using Dayton Superior curing compound, curing seal, or a wet cure for 3 days. You know, you want to maintain the temperature of the grout and contact area at 45 degrees to 90 degrees, as we discussed on the guidelines, for a minimum of 24 hours. So, come on. There we go. So we'll dive into some of the Dayton Superior grouts that we offer in this category. We have a SureGrip High Performance Grout. We have our basic 1107 Advantage Grout, SureGrip Precision Grout, Dri Pak Precast Grout, and Underwater Grout. Our 1107 is probably our highest volume, basic, easy moving one. It meets the ASTMC 1107. It has high compressive strength. We have all the compressive strengths posted and all the consistencies, dry pack to fluid. And, you know, as advertised, it's a non-shrink grout. We have a SureGrip High Performance Grout. It's basically the next step up from our 1107. Meets the 1107 specification, as well as NSF/ANSI potable water approved. We actually did a very large project in Houston, Texas, where we placed this grout, and I think we did roughly 10 to 15 truckloads of it. You know, it was a really good project and a really good success story for us. And we used a lot of this product on that project, but has a lot of high early strength. You can use it all in the same consistencies. But the key thing is you can use this in the potable water category. We have a precision grout. This is a little bit more of a niche grout. You know, it does meet the 1107, but the key thing to point out here is the non-gaseous expansion. There are certain applications where they, you know, grouts do exert a little bit of gas, not very much, but in areas where it is important that you have the non-gaseous expansion, that's where this grout is designed. High compressive strength, high early strength can be used in all the same consistencies as well. We have a Dri Pak Precast Grout, pretty much how it sounds. You know, it's used pretty frequently. It's ideal for precast and tilt wall jobs. You can use it in all consistencies, and it's very easy installation. Our Turbo HP12 grout. This is used, it's our heavy duty one. It's used a lot in the wind turbine industry. You know, it can get up to 13,000 PSI at a flowable consistency at 28 days. And if it's in dry pack, it can even go higher, but more often than not, it's using the flowable consistency. Still meets the 1107 specification, high early strength, non-bleeding, non-segregating, just a great product overall. And this is kind of a continuance on that with, you know, our turbo grout, but the main difference between this one is the LT means low temp. This can be applied below our 45 degrees, as we talked about earlier, and it can be placed down to 35 degrees. It can get up to 14,000 PSI at 28 days at the 35 degree marker. And it can also get 3,000 PSI within 2 hours at the 35 degree marker. It's a great product. I've seen guys use it, you know, in the 40 to 50 degree range if they want a quick turnaround time. Just a little bit quicker, but this is definitely not a product you want to use if you're probably at 60 degrees and above. It will get away from them if they're doing large projects. If it's a small area, possibly, but this is also another good product to use in the wind turbine business, especially in cold climates. Then we have our underwater grout, pretty much self-explanatory as it says. You can place this underwater. You can almost guarantee it has the consistency of some hydraulic cement to push away. Has positive expansion, but also still meets your basic ASTM C1107 specification. And then our Epoxy Grout J55. You know, it's a great product. It's been around a long time. It's got a high flow with aggregates, 14,000 PSI, 100% solids, high chemical resistance, high early strength. You get about an hour and a half working time, and it's 3 parts. You have your resin A, your resin B, and then your C would be your aggregate. And so to summarize this, as we wrap it up, you know, we kind of touched on the 1107 specification and what its important is around the non-shrink grout. We referenced, you know, the Corps of Engineers in favor of 1107. Epoxy grouts, best for dynamic loading and heavy vibration. Surface preparation, you know, proper mixing, cementitious grouts, and required vertical restraint, and the use of a head box and place grouting and curing as well. So that should summarize it. Heidi?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So while you guys are typing in your questions in the Zoom chat functionality, I want to thank you for joining us today. Oh, we have one. All right. Does the mixing water volume affect the expansion performance?
It typically does not affect it. It's just basically it's going to affect your yield a little bit differently, but as far as the expansion, no.
All right, thank you. Okay, while you're still typing in, I just want to remind you that we did record this. If you've missed any of the other ones in the past Tuesdays, they are also out on our YouTube channels as well as DaytonSuperior.com. You can go out and search on Training Tuesdays, and you can register for the next Tuesday presentation, as well as see past webinars that we've held or past presentations that Chuck, our national presenter for training, has done. In fact, if you want to talk to Chuck, Caleb, go. Thank you. Fantastic. So here is poor Chuck's contact information. He's sitting here across from me in the room, smiling. You can contact him and get some training set up for your company. Oh, we have another question. All right. Is there a Spanish language included on your bags? So I'll take this one, Caleb, unless you want to, but there are, maybe not for the directions, but they're for the safety requirements. Do you know if the directions are on there, Caleb, in Spanish? I know they are.
I think in Spanish. I don't think we have any other language on there, but I'm pretty sure we have it in Spanish and English.
Yep, and there's French, Spanish, and English. I do know that. I just wanted to make sure the instructions were there. I know it's the safety and whatnot because I've translated that myself with the help of some of our French and Spanish-speaking sales guys. So, yeah, that's great. All right, so, and again, as a reminder, we will send out an email, let you guys know where to find this recording if you want to re-listen. And there's no other questions. Doesn't look like there is. I'll give you a second to type. Someone has a cute dog. Also, a reminder, I know that Caleb referenced the TDS technical data sheets, as well as inside testing results for some of the products that he went over, the 1107, Dri Pak, Underwater, J55. You can find all of this and more information on DaytonSuperior.com. We've redone our website, and I think it looks pretty nice. It's easier to find certain information. Safety data sheets are also included there. Just type in the product that you want to review, and it'll talk you through it. And on the left side, you'll see some of that documents that I'm referring to. So it appears that we don't have any other questions, so I will say thank you again for attending and have a happy Tuesday. See you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Caleb.